Have you ever had that sinking feeling that something about the person you love doesn't quite add up, but every time you try to grab onto the thought, it slips through your fingers like fog? Like your brain is trying to protect you from a truth it already knows. If you felt that, then stay right here. Because this story, my story, is going to hit you in a place you didn't know existed. I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll get the answer you came here for. But I'm also warning you, it won't be the answer you're expecting. This isn't just about a woman lying to her husband. This is about identity, memory, secrets, and the terrifying possibility that someone you sleep next to every night may not be who they say they are. So if you've ever Googled things like, why does my partner feel like a stranger? Or how to know if someone is hiding something from you? Or you've gone down those YouTube rabbit holes about secret double lives, suppressed memories, or people vanishing from the system, then don't even think about clicking away. Because the rabbit hole I fell into started with a single word, and it came from our neighbor's mouth. We had just moved into a quiet little cul-de-sac in northern Oregon. It was the kind of street you only see in real estate ads. Neatly trimmed hedges, porch swings that actually get used, neighbors who wave at each other with those big Midwestern smiles. My wife, Lila, was glowing the day we pulled into the driveway. You know when someone looks like they've just crossed some invisible finish line? That's how she looked. The sun was bouncing off her dark hair. She was humming, and she said, "This place feels like a fresh start." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been together 5 years. Married for 3. She'd never given me a reason to doubt her. Until that day. It happened during something so ordinary, so painfully suburban. It still messes with my head how fast it unraveled from there. We were outside unpacking boxes from the moving truck when this elderly woman shuffled across the lawn. Kind of hunched over, wearing one of those vintage windbreakers from the 90s, like the ones in retro TikToks. She was carrying a tin of brownies. Just the perfect picture of the classic, welcome to the neighborhood moment. I smiled, Lila smiled, and as I started to introduce us, the woman cut me off, locked eyes with my wife, and said, clear as day, "Lila, you're back." No question in her voice. Just recognition. Familiarity. History. Lila froze. And I don't mean awkward silence. I mean her body stiffened, her breath caught, and her eyes flicked over to me for just a millisecond like she was calculating something. Then she laughed. One of those weird, high-pitched, forced laughs people do when they're trying to act casual but failing badly. "Oh no. You must have me confused with someone else," she said, her voice too quick, too tight. "I've never been here before." And right there, that was the moment everything shifted. I don't know if you've ever witnessed someone lie in real time, but it's different when you know them. When you know how their mouth moves when they're telling the truth. How their voice sounds when it's real. Lila's laugh didn't sound like Lila. Her face didn't look like her face. It was like watching someone try to wear their own skin like a costume. The neighbor blinked a few times, clearly confused, then just kind of nodded and said something about being old and forgetful, and she walked off. But the damage was done. My wife, who I'd spent the last 3 years planning a future with, had just been recognized by someone in a neighborhood she swore she'd never even visited. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, maybe it was a coincidence. People look like other people. This isn't a Netflix documentary. And I told myself that too for about 10 minutes. But then things started happening that made the lie too loud to ignore. Little things at first. Lila knew where the light switches were before I did. She instinctively avoided the 4th step on the back porch because it creaked, even though we'd never been there before. She said she hated cats, yet when one from across the street wandered into our yard, it came straight to her like it knew her. She called it Pickle. Its name was Pickle. The owner told me later. And I started to feel like I was in some kind of psychological thriller, one where the person you love most starts glitching in ways too subtle to explain to anyone else. I tried asking her again about the neighbor. Maybe you came here as a kid? Maybe on vacation? She looked me dead in the eye and said, "No, never." Why would I lie about that? And honestly, that was a good question. Why would she lie? What could possibly be hiding in this peaceful little town that would make her pretend she'd never set foot in it? I didn't have answers yet, but the more I watched her, the more things I noticed. She refused to go into the attic. Said it gave her a weird feeling. The night we set up our bedroom, she asked if we could keep the windows closed, said the view of the woods made her feel exposed. When I pressed her about it, she got defensive. That was new. Lila had never been defensive with me before. And once you start seeing the cracks in a person's story, you can't unsee them. I started doing what anyone with a Wi-Fi connection and paranoia would do. Searching. I checked public records. Nothing unusual. Her ID said she was from Nevada. Born and raised. I ran background checks. Nothing. No criminal records. No history in Oregon. No previous addresses that linked to our current house. But you know what they say, the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence. It's easy to erase paper trails if you know how. I began wondering, was she in witness protection? Did she grow up here under a different name? Was she involved in something? The way she reacted to the neighbor, it wasn't just surprise. It was fear. And I don't want to lose you here, because this is where the real unraveling starts. The stuff that'll make you question everything you think you know about identity, memory, and trust. Over the next few days, I kept my suspicions quiet. I wanted to see what she would do. And sure enough, one night around 2 a.m., I caught her standing at the front door, just staring. Not outside. Just at the door. Like she was waiting for something or someone. I asked her what she was doing, and she jumped like she'd been electrocuted. Said she had trouble sleeping. Said she heard a noise. Said whatever she could to change the subject. And I didn't push. Not yet. Because I needed more. I needed proof. So I did something I'm not proud of. I installed a motion camera on the porch and one inside the hallway without telling her. I told myself it was for security, but the truth is, I needed to see who she became when she thought no one was watching. And what I found, that footage. Look, I'll show you what I can later in the video. You'll see what I saw. But for now, just know this. There are things your partner does when they think you're asleep that will break you. Things that make you realize you never really knew them. Ever. You see, the footage showed her whispering to herself. Not just muttering, but having full-on conversations, like someone was there. Only no one was. She'd sit at the kitchen table, her face pale and distant, and talk to the empty chair across from her like she was explaining herself to a ghost. She said things like, "It wasn't my fault, and I didn't know he'd come back, and this one still makes my blood cold. I told you never to say my name out loud." She said it in the exact same tone she used with the neighbor. That panic-laced, razor-sharp voice that says more than words ever could. So now I'm asking myself, who is he? Who is she talking to? And why did she say that line like it was a threat? But that's not even the worst part. That came the following week. It was a Saturday morning. Lila said she was going out for groceries, but when she left, I followed her. I know. It's a violation of trust. But trust had already left the building the second she lied about her past. I tailed her down the highway through back roads until she pulled up to a rundown building near the forest edge. It looked abandoned, boarded up. No signs. No other cars. She got out, walked to the side door, knocked 3 times, and was let in. I waited. Watched. And when she came out 45 minutes later, she was crying. Not like she'd just watched a sad movie, but like something had been ripped out of her. And you know what she did next? She walked right past our neighbor's house and waved at the same old woman who mistook her for someone else. But this time, there was no confusion. No hesitation. Just 2 people who clearly knew each other. So now the question you came here with, the one that pulled you into the story, it's about to get real. Why did my wife lie? Why did the neighbor call her by name? What's buried in this town that she's so desperate to hide? And most importantly, what did I find when I finally went into that abandoned building myself? The day after I saw Lila wave to that neighbor, the one she claimed not to know, I started questioning everything I thought I understood about our marriage. I couldn't sleep that night. My brain was stuck in an endless feedback loop of questions and half-formed theories. It's like when you binge one of those true crime YouTube playlists where every new clue only raises more questions. I kept telling myself I must have misunderstood what I saw, that maybe they were just being polite, that the tears were from something else. but deep down, I knew better. You don't lie to someone's face, then cry outside an abandoned building that has no name and no business being open, unless you're hiding something big. Something dark. I needed to make sense of it before it unraveled me. So I started from the beginning, the real beginning, not the day we moved in, but the weeks leading up to it. And what I found, looking back, was that the clues were always there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. About 2 months ago, Lila started acting distant. Not in a big dramatic way, but in these tiny, everyday shifts that only someone close enough to share a bed would notice. She started spacing out during conversations, forgetting details we'd talked about minutes earlier. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and write in this little leather-bound journal I'd never seen before, and when I asked her about it, she'd shrug it off and say it was just dream notes. She even asked if we could move, said the city was getting too loud for her mind. That was how she put it. Too loud for my mind. It sounded poetic at the time, like she just needed peace. But now I think she was scared. Scared of something or someone catching up to her. The move, I realize now, wasn't about peace. It was about hiding. Even our decision to move to Oregon had been sudden. Out of nowhere, she sent me a Zillow link for a modest little 2-bedroom home in this quiet, wooded neighborhood and said, "I think this could be home." And at the time, I was so wrapped up in my work that I didn't question it. I just wanted to support her. But Lila had never been spontaneous like that before. She was always the planner between us. Every birthday gift she gave came with backstory and significance. She once cried because she lost a post-it note that had a perfect quote she wanted to use in our wedding vows. That kind of person doesn't randomly pick a house hours away from our lives without a reason. Something had pulled her there. Or worse, something had been waiting. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that maybe this was all in my head. But then there was that night with the man at the gas station. I didn't mention it earlier because, at the time, I didn't think it mattered.
But now, it won't stop bothering me.
About a week before we moved, Lila and I stopped at this old gas station off the I-5. One of those places where the soda machine still has faded buttons, and the clerk looks like he's been working there since the 80s. Lila stayed in the car while I went inside, but when I came back out, I saw this guy, mid-40s, rough around the edges, standing near the car, talking to her. As I approached, he stepped back quickly. Lila rolled the window up and smiled like everything was fine. Said he'd just asked for directions. I didn't think twice until now. Because now I remember something she said that didn't register at the time. He thought I looked familiar. That was it. Just that. But in the rearview mirror, her hands were shaking. That man wasn't asking for directions. He recognized her. Or thought he did. And something about that scared her enough to lie to me. Again. So, I started looking through her things. I know it's wrong, I do. But I had to understand what I was dealing with.
Her phone was clean.
Too clean. Like someone had wiped it recently. Her emails were mostly junk. But then I found that journal. The one she said was for dreams. I waited until she left for her therapy walk in the woods, a new habit she picked up since the move, and I opened it. At first, it was just random scribbles. Sentences like, "Remember the red door," and "He knows." Pages filled with overlapping circles, lines connecting what looked like names or symbols. But then I hit a section where things got clearer.
Dates.
Names. A place called Ash Hill. And over again, a single phrase written in heavy pen strokes. I didn't mean to come back. Now, if that doesn't chill you, I don't know what will. I didn't mean to come back. Like she returned somewhere she didn't expect to. Or wasn't supposed to. But how could that be? How do you accidentally end up in a neighborhood, in a house, in a town that you swore you'd never been to? Unless she wasn't entirely in control of that decision. Unless something bigger was pulling the strings. That's when I started digging into Ash Hill. I thought maybe it was a nearby town, a mental health center, a church, anything. But there's almost nothing about it online. Except for a few scattered forum posts on old conspiracy threads and one archived Reddit thread that's since been deleted. It mentioned a place in Oregon with that name where, quote, people went to forget. That phrase keeps circling my brain. A place people go to forget. Is that what Lila was doing? Running from something in her past, or maybe from herself. And then there's the neighbor, the old woman. I tried talking to her again. Went over with some mail I claimed was misdelivered. She seemed pleasant enough, but I could tell she didn't buy the act. She asked about Lila again. How's she settling back in? She said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I asked her what she meant. She smiled, tight-lipped, eyes glassy, and said, she used to play in these woods, you know. Long time ago. Before the fire. I asked what fire. She went quiet, just muttered something about ashes and promises, then excused herself. The next day, her house had the blinds drawn. They haven't reopened since. So what fire? What promises? What exactly happened here? I tried confronting Lila that night. I sat her down and told her everything, what I saw at the building, the neighbor, the journal.
She didn't yell.
She didn't deny anything. She just went pale, like her blood had drained from her body. And then she asked, did you open the journal? When I said yes, she just whispered, then it's too late now. I asked too late for what, but she wouldn't say. Just stared out the window toward the forest, like she was waiting for something to come walking out of it. And that's where things started escalating. Because the next night something did. But before I tell you what happened at the window that night and who or what I saw standing just beyond the tree line, you need to know something else. Something I haven't said out loud to anyone yet. Because in all my searching, in all my digging and backtracking through Lila's life, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. A photograph. Buried in an old envelope behind the insulation in the garage. It was weathered, warped from time and heat. A group photo.
Kids.
8 or 9 of them, standing in front of what looked like a large wooden cabin. There was a date scrawled on the back, August 1997, Ash Hill Camp, and in the bottom right corner, nearly hidden behind the shoulder of another girl, was Lila, looking directly at the camera, smiling, like she'd always belonged there. And yet she told me, over and over, that she'd never been to Oregon. So now I have a picture that says she's lying, a journal that says she didn't mean to come back, and a neighbor who remembers her as a child. Add in an abandoned building, a man at a gas station who flinched like he'd seen a ghost, and this creeping dread in my chest that keeps whispering, you don't know her at all, and you've got the exact nightmare I'm living in. And we haven't even gotten to what happened when I went back to that building myself. You'll want to hear what I found in there. But brace yourself. Because what I saw in the basement changed everything. I went back to the building on a cloudy Tuesday afternoon when I knew Lila would be at her weekly therapy session. I waited until she pulled out of the driveway, then drove straight down the winding back roads, heart pounding in my throat the whole way. I don't know what I thought I would find. Maybe some confirmation that everything I was feeling wasn't just paranoia. Maybe something that would finally force her to tell me the truth. I parked around the corner and approached from the tree line, the same way I'd seen her enter. Up close, the place looked even worse than I remembered. Shutters half-hanging, faded graffiti on the side wall, and a creeping dampness that clung to the air like mildew and old paper. But the weirdest thing was that the door she'd gone through, it wasn't locked. In fact, it wasn't even shut all the way. It was cracked open, just slightly, as if waiting for me. And as I stepped inside, I knew, deep in my gut, that I had crossed a line I wouldn't be able to walk back over. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. Not just cool, cold like the kind that sinks into your bones. The floorboards groaned beneath my shoes, and the faint smell of burnt wood lingered under everything. I wandered through a long hallway with peeling wallpaper and doors on either side, each one marked with strange letters, some symbols I didn't recognize. Nothing made sense. Some rooms were completely empty, others were filled with old furniture covered in sheets, as if whoever left had done so in a hurry, but still cared enough to try hiding the past. It was when I found the staircase to the basement that I started to feel watched. Not just paranoid watched, but this sharp, tingling awareness in my spine that someone or something was nearby. Still, I went down, step by step, into a pitch-black basement with only the light of my phone to guide me. The basement was filled with filing cabinets.
Dozens of them.
Lined up in neat rows like a forgotten archive. Some were locked, but others weren't. I opened one and found stacks of manila folders, each labeled with names, dates, and something called phase status.
Most were faded.
Some had red stickers with slashes through them. I flipped through the files until I found something that stopped me cold. A folder labeled LK, escaped/returned. Her initials. Her status. Escaped.
Returned.
My blood froze. Inside the file were photocopies of old photographs, medical forms, intake notes. One note read, "Subject displays dissociative tendencies. Unreliable memory recall. Extreme reaction to triggers related to fire imagery." Another had a warning written in red ink. "Do not disclose her prior identity. Monitor any attempts at integration." I took pictures of everything. Every single page. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the phone still. And then, just as I was about to leave, I heard it. A door creaking open upstairs. Then slow, deliberate footsteps. Someone else was in the building. I moved fast, ducking behind one of the metal filing cabinets and holding my breath as the footsteps grew louder, then paused at the top of the basement stairs. There was no voice, just silence. And then the softest click, like a camera shutter, or maybe a phone being unlocked. I didn't wait to find out. I slipped out through a side access door I hadn't noticed before and sprinted back to my car like hell was on my heels. When I got home, I uploaded all the photos to a hidden cloud drive and deleted the originals from my phone, just in case. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched Lila move through our home like nothing had changed, like she wasn't a complete stranger living in the skin of my wife. The next morning, I went to show the photos to a friend of mine, Tommy, a tech guy I'd known since college who's always been into conspiracy theory breakdowns and online mystery forums. I figured if anyone could make sense of those documents, it was him. But when I opened the cloud drive on his computer, everything was gone. The folder was there, but empty. Not corrupted. Not deleted.
Just wiped.
No metadata. No logs. Like it had never existed. I checked my phone, the recycle bin, even backups, and nothing. I asked Tommy if he'd seen anything weird, and he said something that chilled me more than the missing files. "You sure you uploaded anything? It says the drive hasn't been touched since last week." I knew I had. I remembered it vividly. But now I started questioning my own memory. Had someone gotten into my account? Erased the files? Or had I imagined more than I realized? But I still had the physical evidence, right? The building? The basement? The file cabinet? So I drove back out there that afternoon, determined to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But when I got there, the building was gone. Not destroyed. Not burnt. Just not there. The road was still the same. The trees. The turnoff. But in its place was an empty lot. Overgrown. No tire tracks. No foundation. Just a rusted "no trespassing" sign hanging off one post like it had been there for years. I felt like I'd stepped into an alternate timeline. Like the world was actively trying to gaslight me into believing it never existed. But I know what I saw. I remember the files. I remember Lila's name. The handwriting. The dates. I remember the feeling in my gut that told me I was on the edge of something massive. And now that edge had vanished under my feet. I started questioning everyone. I called the local records office to see if any old buildings had recently been demolished in that area, but they claimed there were no structures ever listed on that plot. Not commercial. Not residential. Nothing. I even went back to the neighbor, but when I knocked on her door this time, it wasn't the same woman who answered. It was a middle-aged man in sweatpants who told me the house had been in his family for decades. Said he didn't know any elderly woman. Said no one else had lived there in years. He looked confused and a little disturbed, like maybe I was the one behaving strangely. I tried showing him a photo of the neighbor I'd snapped earlier on my phone, just a quick shot I'd taken during one of our first days on the block. But that photo? It was gone too. Replaced with a generic thumbnail that just read "File not found." I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. And maybe that's the point. Maybe someone or some group wants me to feel like that. But then something else happened. Something that pulled me deeper than I ever expected to go. I got a text. It came from an unlisted number. No contact. Just a single message. "You're looking in the wrong place." She doesn't even know what she is. I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure whether to respond, delete it, or throw my phone across the room. But then another message came. Ash Hill was shut down in 1998. The fire wasn't an accident. I tried replying, "Who is this?" But it bounced back. Number not in service. Then my screen flickered, glitched, and rebooted itself without warning. And when it came back on, the messages were gone. I didn't tell Lila. I couldn't. At that point, I wasn't even sure who I could trust anymore. I thought about reaching out to someone, anyone online, starting a Reddit thread, uploading what I remembered to a YouTube channel. But something kept holding me back. A voice in my head whispering, the more people you involve, the more dangerous it gets. So I waited. I watched. I started documenting everything I could by hand. Every pattern, every detail. Because I don't know how long I have before even those start disappearing. And just when I thought things couldn't get stranger, just when I thought the trail had gone cold, I found something tucked behind a loose board under the staircase in our house. Not something new. Something old. Forgotten. A Polaroid. Of a girl who looked exactly like Lila but younger. Maybe 10, maybe 12. Standing in front of a burnt-down building. And in the photo, barely visible in the background, was that same symbol I'd seen painted on the doors and the hallway of the now-vanished building. Written on the back, in shaky handwriting, was a single sentence. Asterisk, she always comes back. Asterisk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Because what happens next, I'm not sure either of us are ready for. The moment I flipped that Polaroid over and saw the words, "She always comes back," something deep inside me cracked open. Like a door in my mind that had been locked for years suddenly creaked ajar, letting in a flood of dread I couldn't explain. I sat there in the hallway, clutching that photo with numb fingers, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of trees outside, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to have found it, that someone or something had deliberately hidden it away for a reason. And as I stared at the edges of that burnt-out building in the background of the image, a thought came to me, uninvited and chilling. What if the house we're living in was built over the ashes of something that was never meant to be uncovered? That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. I kept expecting to wake up and find the photo gone or the wall resealed. But it was still there come morning, and so was something else, an email from my sister, Emma. We're not especially close, mostly due to years of distance and our very different personalities, but she'd always kept one foot in my life. What made this strange wasn't that she messaged me out of nowhere, but what the subject line said. "Did you tell her about the dream?" I opened the email with a shaky hand, already knowing it wouldn't be some casual family update. Inside, there was just one line. Asterisk, I had that nightmare again. The one with the fire. But this time, Lila was in it too. Asterisk. I stared at those words like they were written in a language I couldn't translate. Emma didn't even know we'd moved to Oregon yet. I hadn't told her. She hadn't seen Lila in over a year, and there's no way she should have known anything about fires or photos or Polaroids. So I called her. It took a few tries before she picked up, and when she did, she sounded shaken, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. She asked if I was okay, said she'd been meaning to reach out, that she kept having this recurring dream where she was standing in a circle of trees while a house burned behind her, and there were children screaming, and one of them turned around, and it was Lila, only younger. She looked at me like she recognized me, Emma said, her voice cracking, and then she whispered something. I think it was my name, but her voice sounded like it was coming from inside my own head.
I didn't know what to say.
I asked if she remembered the symbol, described the one I saw on the building doors and in the background of the Polaroid. There was a long silence, then she whispered, "It was on the tree bark in the dream." That was all I needed to hear. I told her everything, the building, the erased files, the disappearing neighbor, the journal, and for a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she asked, "Have you checked Lila's birth certificate?" I hadn't. I mean, who checks their spouse's birth certificate after 5 years of marriage? But after that call, I tore through every drawer, every file, every forgotten folder. I found a copy of it in a manila envelope buried in an old lockbox, except there was something wrong with it. The document was real, but the issue date was off. It was dated 3 years after her supposed birth date. That might seem like a clerical error, but the town listed, Mayfield, Nevada, doesn't exist. Not anymore. It was wiped off the map in a wildfire in 2002. A town she supposedly lived in, but which had no survivors listed on official records. And yet here she was. So now I had two people, my wife and my sister, connected to the same dream, the same imagery, the same inexplicable feeling that something ancient and dark was threading itself through our lives. I started to wonder if whatever Lila was tied to wasn't just personal, but something bigger. Something generational. Because when I told Emma where we'd moved down to the zip code, she went dead silent. "You're not going to believe this," she said, "but that's where we used to camp as kids. Mom and Dad took us there one summer before everything fell apart."
You were 5.
I was 8. There was a lodge in the woods, near a clearing. You wouldn't remember, but I do. There was a girl there who used to braid my hair. I think it was Lila. And just like that, the bottom dropped out again. What were the odds? Unless they weren't odds at all, unless our lives were never random, but stitched together by something older than memory. I started thinking maybe this wasn't about Lila's past. Maybe this was about mine, too. That night, after I told Emma to stay close to home and to start documenting her dreams, just in case, I confronted Lila. I asked her flat out if she'd ever been to Ash Hill, if she remembered a girl named Emma, if the fire was real. She didn't deny anything, but she didn't confirm it either. She just said something that didn't make sense at the time. If you tear the stitches, things don't stay buried. You think you're looking for truth, but the truth doesn't care what you believe. And then she went to bed like she hadn't just dropped a live grenade in the middle of our marriage. In the following days, everything got more intense. I'd wake up to find Lila already dressed, pacing the backyard barefoot. The power flickered in and out for no reason. A dead crow appeared on our doorstep, its eyes missing. One morning, the garage door opened by itself at 3:17 a.m., and when I checked the camera feed, it had been wiped clean, just static during that exact window. And then Tommy, my friend who'd helped me earlier with the files, called me in a panic. He said someone had broken into his place. Nothing was stolen, but his laptop had been wiped and all the photos he'd helped recover were gone. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he got an email from a fake account that just said, *, stop helping him. She's not who you think she is. She's never been. *, he didn't want anything more to do with it after that. Said he was done. That he was sorry, but he felt like something was watching him. That the lines between dreams and reality were blurring. That whatever this was, it wasn't just psychological. It was spiritual. Ancient. I should have stopped too. But I couldn't. Because the closer I got, the more the pieces started aligning in ways that made it impossible to turn back. A few nights later, I was going through more of Lila's journal, trying to make sense of her scattered handwriting, when I found something new. A page that hadn't been there before. In ink that was still fresh. It just said, *, the mirror in the hallway isn't a mirror. *. That stopped me cold. We had an old mirror hanging in the hallway near the front door. One of those antique, oval ones with the ornate brass frame. We'd gotten it from a flea market before we moved. I always thought it looked out of place in our home. But I'd never questioned it, until that moment. I walked over to it, my reflection hazy in the moonlight filtering through the curtains, and reached out to touch it. My fingers pressed against the glass and didn't hit wood behind it. Just hollow space. So I removed the frame, lifted the mirror from its hooks, and behind it, hidden in the wall, was a panel. I pried it open with a screwdriver, expecting wiring or maybe a forgotten electrical box. But what I found was a hidden compartment about 2 feet deep. Inside was a single VHS tape, unlabeled, dusty, but intact. And next to it, a folded piece of paper with the words, *, if you're reading this, it means she's awake again. Whatever you do, don't let her remember everything. *. I haven't watched the tape yet. Not yet. Because I'm scared. Not of what it might show me, but of what it might confirm. That none of this is coincidence. That Lila was never just my wife. That my sister's dream, the missing town, the building that disappeared, the fire, and the girl in the photo, they're all part of something bigger. Something hidden. And the worst part? I think I'm starting to remember it, too. Let me know when you're ready for the next chapter. Because once I press play on that tape, there's no turning back. I sat with the VHS tape in my lap for hours, trying to summon the courage to watch it. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried not just plastic and film but something intangible like memory or truth. I thought maybe I was projecting, letting paranoia tint everything around me, but something about that tape terrified me more than anything I discovered so far. It wasn't just what might be on it. It was the implication that someone had put it there, behind a mirror that wasn't a mirror, in a house we'd only just moved into, yet clearly had ties to Lila's forgotten past. That someone expected this moment to happen. That it was part of a plan I hadn't even begun to understand. I finally slid the tape into an old VCR I had boxed away in the garage, and the screen buzzed to life with static. Then black. And then, flickering and grainy, a recording began. It was a room, dimly lit. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, casting shifting shadows on the walls. The camera was fixed in place, and in the center of the frame sat a girl. I couldn't tell how old she was, maybe 10, maybe 12, her face blurry but familiar. She was crying, whispering something to herself, rocking back and forth. A voice, off camera, cold and calm, asked questions like it was part of an interview. "What did you see behind the door, Lila? What did he show you in the mirror? What did you promise not to forget?" The girl didn't answer at first, just kept rocking, whispering something I couldn't make out. But then, in a sudden, glass-breaking scream, she said, "I didn't mean to remember." And then the tape cut out. Just static again. Then silence. I sat there, frozen, my hands trembling. Because that voice, it wasn't the Lila I knew. It wasn't a voice I'd ever heard from her in our entire marriage. It was raw, unfiltered terror. And the way she said remember made it sound like remembering was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. I tried to replay the tape, to study it frame by frame, but the VCR sparked and died right there in front of me, smoke curling from the back like it had short-circuited on cue. That was the first time I seriously thought about leaving. Just packing a bag and getting in the car and driving until my gas ran out. But how do you walk away when you know something is watching? Something that's been waiting? I didn't even realize how late it was until I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Emma, followed by a text that made my blood run cold. Asterisk, I think someone's been in my apartment. My notebook is gone. They left the window open. Asterisk, I called her immediately. No answer. Called again. Nothing. I threw on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and drove across town faster than I should have, my mind spiraling the whole way. What if I had pulled her into something she wasn't meant to be part of? What if she was being targeted just for remembering a dream she didn't ask to have? When I got there, her door was unlocked. Her lights were on, but the place was empty. No sign of struggle. No signs of a break-in. Just absence. Her coat still on the hook. Her phone still on the kitchen counter. Like she'd been lifted out of the world without warning. I called the police, but they asked all the usual questions and gave me all the usual answers. Maybe she stepped out. Any reason she'd want to disappear? They didn't understand. This wasn't just missing person territory anymore. This was something else. Something deeper. She wouldn't have left her notebook behind. She wouldn't have left me in the middle of all this. Not without a word. On the drive back home, I started noticing headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It was a busy street, but when I turned off onto a quieter road, they stayed with me. 2 turns later, still there. I changed direction.
Doubled back.
The same car. Always the same distance. No attempt to pass. No license plate I could clearly make out, just the vague silhouette of a person behind the wheel. Watching. I pulled into a gas station and waited, pretending to fuel up, my eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The car rolled by slowly, then turned down a side street and vanished. I drove home in complete silence, every shadow in the trees now looking like a person standing still. waiting. When I got home, the front door was ajar. I stood there for what felt like years, heart thudding so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. I hadn't left it open. I was sure of it. I reached for the baseball bat I kept in the front closet and pushed the door open slowly. Inside, nothing looked touched. No broken windows. No ransacked drawers. But then I saw it, on the dining room table. My journal. The one I'd been using to record everything. And on top of it, a single Polaroid.
New. Crisp.
Still smelling faintly of chemicals. It was a photo of me sleeping, taken from the hallway, from inside the house, and scrawled on the bottom in the same shaky handwriting as before, "You should have left when you had the chance." I don't even remember sitting down, but at some point I collapsed into the chair and just stared at that photo, the weight of it pressing down on my chest like a concrete block. Someone had been inside my house while I was gone. Someone had been close enough to watch me sleep, to leave me a message. And somehow, I hadn't heard a thing. That's when the fear really took hold, not just for me, but for Lila. Because if they'd gotten to Emma, if they'd been in my home, then who was safe? I ran upstairs to check on her, to make sure she was still here. Her door was locked, which was strange enough, but when I knocked, she didn't answer. I banged harder, called her name. Nothing. Finally, she opened it. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. I asked her if she was okay, and she just nodded, silent. I held up the Polaroid and asked if she knew anything about it. She looked at it for a long time, then said, quietly, "They're not after you. Not yet." I asked what that meant, who they were. She wouldn't say, just sat down on the bed and stared at the wall, rocking slightly, whispering something under her breath that sounded like a rhyme. I didn't press her.
Not then.
Because for the first time, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until that moment. Lila was afraid of herself. And I was starting to understand why. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Because what I found in our attic the next morning changed everything I thought I knew. I couldn't shake the feeling that something in our home was still waiting to be found. Something that hadn't just been hidden, but buried. The Polaroid of me sleeping, the strange message about Lila waking up, the disappearing building, the erased files, Emma vanishing without a trace. It all pointed toward a larger truth I hadn't yet cracked open. And somehow, the house itself felt complicit in keeping that truth from me. So the next morning I started with the attic. I don't know why exactly. It was more instinct than logic. Just that itchy feeling behind my eyes like something was whispering, "Look up." The attic hatch was old and stiff, and the pull string had always been jammed, but I dragged a ladder from the garage and forced it open anyway. Dust rained down like ash, coating my shirt, stinging my throat. I climbed up, flashlight in hand, half expecting nothing more than insulation and spiders. But what I found wasn't empty. In the corner of the attic, behind a half-rotted support beam, there was a trunk. Not some modern storage bin, but an old-fashioned chest, wood cracked and lined with tarnished iron. Like something that belonged in a history museum. I had to pry it open with a crowbar. Inside, there were stacks of old documents, brittle and yellowing with time, newspaper clippings, grainy black and white photographs, and dozens of cassette tapes labeled only with dates. But what froze me in place was the photo on top. It was Lila again. Or at least someone who looked exactly like her. Same face. Same eyes. But the picture was dated July 1968. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was her mother or an aunt. Maybe Lila had a twin she never talked about. But as I dug deeper into the chest, I found more photos. One from 1975, another from 1983. Different clothing, different hairstyles. Always the same face. Always Lila. No aging. No explanation. Just a recurring figure across time. Always near a building that looked like the one that vanished from the woods. The one she claimed never existed. That was when I knew this wasn't just about a forgotten childhood or a missing memory. This wasn't about lies anymore. This was about time. About cycles. About something returning over and over again. I spent the rest of the day going through the cassette tapes, using an old recorder I found in the garage. Most were muffled, degraded from age. But a few were still audible. They were interviews, dozens of them, conducted by the same calm, detached voice I'd heard on the VHS tape. Sometimes with children, sometimes with adults. All of them talking about the mirrors, about the fire, about remembering the man with no face. It was like listening to therapy sessions or confessions. And then I heard a voice I recognized. Lila. She was younger, maybe 15. But it was her, no question. She said things that made no sense at first, about being pulled from a lake, about forgetting her name, about waking up in new families and always ending up near the woods. But it was what the interviewer said next that completely rewired everything I thought I understood. Do you remember your last handler, Lila? The one assigned to watch you in '93? She was silent. Then he said, his name was David. He was your husband in that cycle. And Lila whispered, they said I wasn't supposed to remember him yet. I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor with a dull thud, and I just sat there staring at the wall, every part of my body suddenly numb. David. That's my name. Not a common stand-in. Not some placeholder. Me, I was the handler. Or I had been, and Lila, my wife, had cycled through this before. Maybe dozens of times. Always returning. Always forgetting. And me? I'd been part of it once. Maybe more than once. It hit me like a punch to the chest. What if I hadn't just stumbled into this mystery? What if I was written into it? What if this entire life I built with Lila wasn't an accident, but part of a loop I couldn't remember? A role I was meant to play, again and again, until something broke the cycle? And now that I was asking questions, now that I'd seen too much, remembered too much, maybe that's why things were unraveling. Maybe I wasn't supposed to wake up, either. That night, I confronted Lila again. I told her everything. The chest, the photos, the tapes. I watched her face as I spoke, and I saw it. Something subtle but unmistakable. Not shock. Not denial. Just sadness. Like she'd been waiting for this moment, and dreading it. She sat down at the kitchen table and said, I hoped this time would be different. I hoped we'd make it to the end without remembering. I asked her what that meant. What end? And she said, every cycle ends in fire. That's the rule. It's not punishment, it's release. I asked her who they were. She wouldn't answer. Just stared at the window like she was seeing something far away. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. If you still care about me, she said, don't ask anything else. Not until the others find you. Not until they bring the mirror. That's when I knew we weren't alone in this anymore. There were others. People or things that existed outside the bounds of time and memory, watching these cycles play out. Managing them. Erasing what needed to be erased. And somehow, I had stepped outside my role, become aware. Maybe that was the danger. Not what Lila remembered, but that I remembered too. That night, I got another text. From Emma's number. Only it wasn't her. It said, asterisk, she was never your sister. She was your first anchor. You should have let her burn, asterisk. I didn't sleep after that. Because suddenly, the woman I'd called my sister for 30 years might not have been family at all. And if she wasn't, if Emma was never who I thought she was, then what else about my life was fabricated? And what's waiting in the fire this time? Let me know when you're ready for the next chapter. Because the next message I received came from someone who was supposed to be dead. The last message came at 2:39 a.m., blinking into existence on my cracked phone screen like it had been waiting for the exact second I let my guard down. No contact name. No timestamp. Just 4 words that dropped into my bloodstream like ice water. He remembers you now. I didn't need to ask who he was. I didn't need to respond. Something inside me already understood the final act had begun. The air around me felt heavier, like the very walls were listening. I stood in the center of our living room, the silence so thick it was practically alive. Lila had vanished again. No note, no sound, just the faint scent of smoke lingering on her pillow like a warning. And I finally understood what she meant when she said, every cycle ends in fire. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't poetic. It was prophecy. I raced to the attic again. hauling up the trunk with trembling hands and tearing through every photo, tape, newspaper, anything that might lead me to whatever came next. That's when I saw it, something I'd missed before. Tucked inside one of the cassette boxes was a folded sheet of film negatives. I held it up to the light, and my heart locked in my throat. There, frozen in reverse, was a photo of me, much younger, maybe early 20s, standing in front of the burned-out ruins of the same building I thought I had discovered only recently. But there was no mistaking it. It was me. Not someone who looked like me. Me, and I wasn't alone in the photo. Behind me stood a figure cloaked in shadow, wearing what looked like a broken mirror as a mask.
Tall.
Rigid. Watching. The final piece snapped into place, not with clarity, but with dread. This wasn't just about Lila's memory or mine. This wasn't about love, or deception, or even time. This was about loops. Lives recycled.
Erased.
Restarted. But not by chance, by design. Orchestrated by something ancient that lived between the lives we remembered. Something that wore faces made of reflection and called itself a guardian, or a god, or maybe both. And now it was awake. I felt it. Every light in the house flickered once, then again. And then they all went out. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was just my reflection in the mirror at the end of the hallway. But then it moved, and I didn't. It tilted its head, raised one hand slowly, and reached toward the glass from the inside. I stumbled back, heart jackhammering, breath jagged and shallow, as the mirror began to ripple. Not shatter, not crack, asterisk ripple asterisk, like water catching the wind. From the center of that ripple stepped the figure from the photo. Tall, impossibly tall, wrapped in a coat that seemed made of stitched shadows and scorched cloth. Its mask was a jagged, fractured mirror that reflected only me. But wrong. Older.
Scarred. Tired.
Like a version of myself that had lived 1,000 lives and regretted every one of them.
He didn't speak.
He didn't need to. I felt his voice in my spine, in my teeth, in the deepest marrow of me. And it wasn't words exactly. It was memory, the sound of flames, the feeling of drowning, the pressure of being watched by something older than the sun. And then images, fast, brutal, suffocating, flashed across my mind. Dozens of versions of me. Different houses. Different names. Always with Lila. Always ending the same way. A mirror. A fire. A scream. I collapsed to the floor, eyes burning, hands gripping my skull as if I could claw the visions out. You were supposed to forget. Came the voice finally. Real this time, low and distorted like it echoed through steel and bone. You were the anchor. You kept her stable. You were the break in the storm. But you started remembering. Again. He crouched low, his face inches from mine, the reflection in his mask showing a version of me curled in a burning room, holding Lila's lifeless body. You always ruin it. I wanted to ask what it was. What purpose this cycle served. Why us? Why her? But deep down, I already knew the answer.
We weren't people to him.
We were programs. Experiments. Cogs in a cosmic engine meant to run over and over, refining something he refused to name.
And I
had broken it. My memory, my love for Lila, my refusal to forget. That was the anomaly. And anomalies had to be erased. That's when the fire started. First in the kitchen. Then the hallway. Then the walls began to breathe smoke like lungs exhaling their final breath. I stumbled toward the stairs, coughing, calling Lila's name, desperate to find her, to choose her again before the loop reset. And then I saw her, standing calmly in the center of the burning living room, her skin bathed in orange light, her eyes calm, distant. He's letting me remember now, she said, her voice eerily serene. It hurts, David. Every cycle hurts. But this time, maybe we burn together. I grabbed her arm, begged her to run. But she shook her head. You were never supposed to wake up with me, she whispered. But you always do. That's why he keeps you close.
You're the key.
You're the break. Then she pressed something into my hand. A small, warm object. I looked down and saw it, another Polaroid. But this one wasn't aged or threatening. It was of us.
Smiling.
Sitting on a porch somewhere green, sun shining behind us. A version of us I didn't remember, but that felt real. Felt possible. If we burn this time, she said, voice breaking, maybe we come back somewhere better. The mirror figure stepped into the flames behind her, rising like a shadow cast backward through time. I screamed, pulled her close, and the world split apart. And then nothing. Blackness. Silence. Except not quite. Somewhere far away, in the static hum of the void, a voice whispered, "Try again." And then I opened my eyes. Different house. Different city. Different name. Lila, humming in the kitchen. A mirror on the wall. Still cracked. Still watching. Let me know when you're ready for the final resolution. Because in this life, I finally remember everything. The light in this new life felt softer somehow. Not in the literal sense, but in the way certain dreams feel after you've woken up. Familiar, but dulled at the edges, like they've been translated into something survivable. I sat on the porch of a modest blue house that smelled of cedar and sunlight, watching Lila tend to the garden, her hands moving through the soil like she'd done it 100 times before. But I knew she hadn't. Not here. Not in this version. This was a new cycle, one where the past didn't cling to us like smoke. And yet, even as the breeze danced through the trees and the distant laughter of neighborhood kids floated in the air, I couldn't stop feeling it. That subtle pressure behind my eyes. The memory of fire. Of mirrors. Of that voice. Try again. It hadn't been a demand. It hadn't even felt like a warning. It was an invitation. One I had accepted, without realizing it. And now, here we were, different names on the mailbox, different town on the welcome sign, but the same two souls trying, once again, to outrun whatever had been chasing us through lifetimes. I spent days searching for cracks in the world, waiting for shadows to move when they shouldn't, for reflections to blink out of sync. I walked past every mirror in the house twice. I unplugged the Wi-Fi. I kept every Polaroid from the old life hidden under a floorboard beneath my bed, just in case. But time passed and nothing strange happened. No mysterious photos, no disappearing neighbors, no flickering lights or secret symbols etched into hidden walls. Lila didn't mention anything either, though I often caught her staring into the distance, like she was listening for something just beyond the edge of hearing. We never talked about what came before. Not out of fear. Not even denial. It was something quieter. We both understood the weight of memory. We knew that if we pulled the thread, we might unravel everything we'd built here.
So we lived gently.
And I began to wonder if this quiet, unextraordinary life was the loophole, if refusing to chase the mystery was the only way to truly break it. But closure isn't always clean. Peace rarely comes without a scar. The truth is, I still don't know exactly who he was, the figure in the mirror. Whether he was some ancient force playing God with time, or something birthed from our own trauma and memory. I don't know why Lila and I were chosen, why we had to relive those moments again and again, burning and resetting and forgetting only to find each other once more. But I know this. We weren't victims. Not entirely. Somewhere along the line, we chose to fight the cycle. We chose to remember. And maybe that's what saved us. Maybe memory, terrifying as it is the one thing more powerful than whatever waited behind the glass. Because memory connects. It heals. It redefines. And it gave us the strength to change the ending. Emma was never mentioned again. I still don't know if she was real, or a construct, or something in between. But in this life, I received a letter 2 weeks after we moved in. No return address, no explanation. Just a postcard with a burned church on one side and a single line on the back. Asterisk, she is safe now. So are you? Asterisk, I kept it. Not out of paranoia, but as proof that we'd come through the fire. That someone else remembered too. Sometimes, late at night, I still sit by the mirror in the hallway. It's smaller now, antique, flecked with age. I stare into it and wait. Not because I expect him to return, but because part of me wants to believe he no longer needs to. That whatever he was trying to fix or force or protect is no longer broken. Maybe we were never meant to solve the puzzle. Maybe the act of loving each other despite the horror was the real purpose. Because even when everything burned, memories, lives, identities, somehow we always found our way back. This time we've stayed. That's not to say the story is over. I don't think stories like this ever end completely. They settle. They shift into quieter things. The scars remain, but they no longer bleed. And even if there are more cycles ahead, more layers we'll never understand, at least now, we face them knowing what we are. Not pawns. Not prisoners. But survivors. Witnesses. And maybe even something more. So if you've made it this far, if you've followed every twist, every turn, every question that refused to be answered, I want you to know, the truth isn't always about exposing what's hidden. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop digging, when to let go, when to finally live, not because the darkness isn't real, but because peace is possible in spite of it. And if someday a stranger calls your name, in a town you swear you've never been, look twice, and trust what you feel, because sometimes remembering is the most dangerous thing of all. But it's also the only way out.